All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, my mic. Gotta get my mic on. Okay. Okay, hi. We could raise this a little bit. We're sharing our process of our sewing ritual, and this is episode 2 of this is the gestating narratives. And you can look below, there's a link for kind of like the dance of how this piece has come into being so far. There's like a few different garments that have gone into it. But first I want to enter into a space and create a space for the space of making and creating to be embodied and to become like a song or a dance or poetry. And to do that, I want to bring in our imagination flag here. So we'll raise our flag. Standing on the coast Salish land, standing on this earth with the sky above and the sea that surrounds, we call on the elements of fire, water, earth, and air to guide us. We call on our ancestors to guide us through the process of regenerating meaning, regenerating characters and costumes to embody that are holistic, that are felt, that are made with the pulse of our hearts. And so if you're tuning in, I welcome you to comment in the chat or anything, even anything about yourself. And then you can become a part of the story as well. And so what happened was, yesterday I started this series because I want to get a feel for the finishing work, all the meticulous small stitches, kind of close up for finishing this garment. And I started doing that, and we made some stitches yesterday. Here's the gathering stitch. You can see in the front that's been connected. It's not completely attached. And so as I narrate what I'm doing, and as I vocalize my thought processes and reflections, they can also serve as an analogy for moving through space, and something for you to also reflect on too, because this is also a process of thinking about how we can not only mend our clothing and remake from these synthetic materials that are going to be around for a long time, and also with ourselves and each other. And so in that, even seeing anybody joining in, it becomes a part of that story and that experience as we're recording this whole process as well. And also we're in the imagination plane now, so it's the dream space. And so yesterday it was just, I was sewing this thing in a pile, and there were lots of different layers, lots of different things happening. Right now I have on excuse me, Right now I have on my pants underneath this that is made from some tank tops and a t-shirt that I'm going to be dyeing eventually, but for now these are my long underwears hanging out the bottom. And so yeah, I want to get a feeling for what is happening in all of these layers, because there was like some twisted, this is the twisting that I was wondering about. If you can see, let's see here, there's this twisting. And we also wrote a poem about the initial dance, and this is a good reflection to come back to for like the movement. As I first put these garments on and was like cutting them up and feeling what needed to be released, what needed to be like repinned and re-sculpted around the body. And this is the poem. Fruit is sun glow, pull through dreaded shoulder. Relaxed shoulders, warm I am, egg escape, shell, held by wonder, emerge through, blackened backs, shadows turned, face to the sun, to the fruit. Morning turns and swells. This feels turns and swells, responsive in rising. So this twisted shoulder, who are you? Do you want to be twisted, or do you want to pull through somehow? What is happening? What is happening? We do have, here is where we released that hem yesterday in episode 1. And just putting this back on the body is like seeing where things are landing as they're becoming more secure, because before they were just pinned here. And so kind of revisiting this situation is definitely something to think about. Now it's very twisted. Does it want to be twisted? I think that's kind of what's happened. And all of these scrunched shoulders feels like they want to be like that. But this part, I'm not so sure. This reminds me of like military shoulder links. And so I'm going to release these parts. And wonder where they want to go. Wonder, where do you want to go? There was all this gathering happening yesterday. It was a call for gathering. Releasing these plackets. This strange, feels so like it's been attached, but what feels like an apron. Which makes me, on one hand, think of domestication, and then on another hand, it makes me think of nurturing. Yeah, let me look what's happening here. Okay. Oops, didn't mean to flip that screen. Come back around. Okay. So we have these floppy bits coming. Do they just want to rest in place? Does this just want to go back to where it was? I don't think so. I think I might have to remove it completely and then bring it somewhere else because we want that feeling of nurturance, but I also want the feeling of at least being open to not being separate from nature, but being nature. And I feel like that's kind of what domestication feels like, is this succumbing belief that we're separate from nature. But I don't believe that. So here I am being nature and thinking about these things. So I think that these wings will just land where they land, and then we're going to release the placket that once enclosed the domestication. We're going to release it, and then there's these sleeve holes, but I like how they're collapsing here, I like how they're pleating. The only thing is that there's this, what happens when this happens? What happens when I pull the sleeve through? No. There's also a tear right here. And what was that? That was releasing this. And there's just a whole lot happening right there. Does it need to go the other direction? No. What? Does it need to come up and around here? There's just lots of frumps. The dreaded shoulder. This dimensional link between my heart and my embrace. I think I'll put the sleeve back on. Like, yes, okay. Sleeve goes back on, like that. And, but this one is still flipped. I don't think it's, yes, it has been sewn. It's been sewn in that way. But what happens when I try to pull it through? Like, does that do something? Does that move everything else around? Yeah. Yeah, it does, and just makes me wonder why these bits are coming together. And now my bracelet is caught in the safety pin. Okay, so we're good. So another thing is like, oh, this pin. That pin came out. What does that change? Huh. Now it just falls down. I actually like this arm, like this. I'm trying not to flash you. I like this extension. Ooh. Ah. Hey. Ooh. Let me just see. I forgot to forgot to do something. Give me a second. Where should this camera go? Hey, so I started this stream over again. This is the Twitch thing. I don't know if I really if I really enjoy streaming to all these things at the same time, but this is like a way for me to share my process with you. And I started that over because I didn't think I did it right, and it just did the same thing again. So I'll look at that more later, but it's the Gestating Narratives episode 2. And we released our sleeve, and now there's this like great scrunch. What happens if this becomes attached? This could just attach to here, all the way down to the end. Let's try pinning that in place. Can you see what I'm doing? The scrunch started coming out. I'm going to release that pin that I just put in. I think that in this process there can be like a lot of discomfort, which is part of the reason I'm doing it, is like, why are these things, why are these garments not sustainable in their style, in their previous like construction? How are they not? How is their story like kind of run dry, and how can there be new life breathed into it? So maybe part of it is that like these sleeves remain flexible. Like maybe you could use this sleeve, this one, and then you could like tie it in the back, or you could put this one on. And so now it's just my job to finish it with these different openings for options. And we're going to stitch this down. We're going to release the placket. Right now there's just like a neck hole, and so I'm going to need to finish that somehow. And all the other parts, all the other moving parts. This side. We're going to leave that. And this placket. Maybe that can be pleated in to become a part of that and rejoin that area. And so, okay. Once I get a feeling for what it is that I can take hold of when I'm not wearing it, then can move on. So I see this side part. There's this side part. Okay. So this was like the sleeve, and that was cut off, but still like the sleeve cap is on there, and there's like a seam that I need to complete here that's pinned together. But I like how the sleeve is falling into like this pleat, but it's not going, we're not going to just continue this seam like it would be straight, because then it wouldn't collapse the same. So I'm going to pin like where it is collapsing, where it is falling, and then I can pin that in place, and then we can finish that. Another thing I started doing, where is it? There's like a pocket somewhere on here that I started taking apart. I started playing with the layers of that pocket, and I feel like it wants more attention. Like, I feel like that was wanting this like black and white pattern to kind of like become more of a textural movement throughout the piece as I'm integrating these different parts together. And so that's another thing to think about, is like how might I weave parts through, and do I need more material, or do I just want to work with this material that's already there? Because if I start weaving things through, it's going to change a lot. But maybe that's what this does. Maybe that's what all these arms coming together here and here, maybe they all start to weave together. So the thing I like about them now, though, is that it's like when I move my arms, it like creates, it feels really dramatic because it like moves the whole thing. And I like that about it. But these flowers and these lines are they make me the feeling they give me is that I'm like settling. I'm settling inside a cage. And I don't want to settle inside a cage. So maybe once I attach this piece, maybe I can cut out, because it's going to be appliqued on top of the blue. And so maybe then I can cut the blue out from behind and put that somewhere else, and that layering can be something. What will it be? Okay, so I'm gonna step to the side and put on my other garment. Where's the shirt? Oh. Okay, so we're gonna move to a new place. We're gonna move to sewing those parts now. We have our ironing board and our sewing machine ready to stitch these parts. So come along over here to the table. There's our ironing board. There's our piece. And first, let's bring it over to the table. There's our imagination flag. First, let's bring it over to the table to think about, where to begin in all of this. Where to begin in all of this? So I'll take a look. What is this? What is happening now? The first thing to kind of come to mind is some of the unpicking we have to do. And let me just make sure this sound's working. How can I test that? Well, I don't know. Hopefully it's been working. Anyways, here we are. you. Just want to zoom in. This pile. A lot of this video is just going to be looking at a pile, and instead of the pile sitting in a landfill womb or sitting in a closet forgotten, the pile is slowly being transformed, just one stitch at a time. And as we unpick these stitches, it can be a time to think about what it is that we're releasing in our lives. What it is that we're letting go of. The stitches, the things that are like binding us, the things that are holding us together, but in this case, the material is not being let go of. It's kind of just being rearranged. And so perhaps there's something in your life that needs kind of a rearranging. And what might that be? Maybe this could be a time to do that. Or maybe there's something in your mind. Maybe there's something in my mind I could rearrange. Thinking like my priorities, different priorities, maybe I could rearrange so that I am feeling vital, so that I have space to transform myself. And that could be something really specific. Or that could be something that I am just open to. I'm wondering what specifically it could be. I kind of have an idea. It relates to this whole thing being like a process. And like being willing to, I feel very willing to question a lot of things. At the same time, like it takes a lot of, I feel like I need a lot of patience in order to work through. It takes patience and energy. I think to process all of that, and in this process in particular, it's something that's intuitive. It's not something that I'm reading. Although I have influences and that have definitely shaped and are still shaping, and many more to come. So how is this space of reflection a space to process things like that? And what is this virtual space where I'm physically not alone, but what I am with are these materials, is my environment, this room and this land, and all the elements that have come in to this place. I'm feeling like as I like bring my awareness to the ground, I'm on the second floor of this house, and so part of me feels like there's space between me and the ground, and another part of me recognizes the wood as the ground, as like a connection to the ground. But it definitely feels different than being on the first floor like I was in the past. But so as I bring my awareness to that, I'm feeling like underneath my feet, I'm feeling purple swirls, and the purple swirls are moving through like a thicker kind of energy. And so the swirls, it's not like water, it's more it's it's more like honey or like akasha, and it's swirling beneath my feet, and there's like lighter streaks. They're not, yeah, they're lighter streaks kind of running through it. I'm gonna drink some water. And so as I unpick the stitches of this placket, I get a lot of joy from unpicking plackets. It's like this kind of feeling of release, but then also thinking of like the awareness of other parts of my body too, and like where I'm at. What does that tell me? That it tells me that there's space to dream in this context, and dream about how I relate to my grounding. And I love that a lot because I think that's definitely related to the questions that I'm asking, but sometimes feeling them, noticing how they feel in my body can be translated a lot differently than trying to articulate them. In like mental, in other thought patterns that I don't, in mental thought patterns of like dissonance that I don't particularly want to engage with now, but because I don't think it's doesn't feel like the right space to do that. But then yeah, like but maybe it is. I think it's related to being on this occupied land and thinking about my ancestors. Something that I didn't do when calling in my ancestors, what that I is a practice that I want to start doing, is more around calling in my healed ancestors as guides. And that seems like something that can bring clarity. But it also feels like it neglects pains of the past. But then how can the pains of the past be released into the soil and into the ground? How can they be released to the next place? Is it ever a process of is it a process of needing to acknowledge it and acknowledge the traumas that have led to so much disconnection? I think it is, in order to then move into a place of moving from a different space that's not stuck in traumatized patterns. And how do we do that? I think that's why I wanted to call in just my healed ancestors now, and unpicking the buttons. I think that these buttons were all hand stitched on here. And yeah, another thing I wanted to say about that was, even in this act of tending, how is that healing in of itself? And so that's pretty much the sewing. It's sewing is so funny. So that the feeling really reminds me of tending. And yeah, tending my mind, practicing metacognition. Not trying to control the garden of my heart mind, but tending to it and focusing on what it is that I do love. And so, yeah, I feel really thankful to be able to share this, and it's also kind of feels weird because I don't know, there's a lot of mystery. I don't really know, I don't really plan what I'm going to say when I enter into this space, into this like public space with you. But then at the same time, like kind of falling in love with this process of making something, and like being transparent about the energy that's going into it. And so that's something that I love about it, is being able to create something for somebody else to be in. And this morning I was watching, if you haven't heard of the Slow Factory, I recommend you go and check them out. But they have an open education series of different classes, and then I was watching a replay of the class on fashion and spirituality, and I think her name was Anise. What was her name? Anissa. Anissa Tavangar was talking about fashion and spirituality, and like fashion as an expression of the material, like the material, and the material is an expression of our internal lives or existence. And so in reflecting on how to revive like the ritual of making I'm thinking about dreams, not dreams of like, because I think I think that there are some dreams that need to be composted, like all the dreams that come from our disconnection. Those can be composted, but when I'm thinking of dreams that I have and that I share with a lot of people, I think that can be something to, so that's something I think that we embody and bring to life. And so to also infuse those dreams and those thought processes into what we're making and how we're making, that literally brings it to life. And in and recontextualizing labor to be not this like kind of reduction of some kind of repetitive motion, and more like an intentional repetitive motion where it's where it's like it's a choice, where it recognizes our consciousness. And so, do I want to release these buttonholes? I don't know. I might keep them because maybe they can button to something, and I don't feel like if I cut them open, then there's these 3 holes is going to turn into 6 holes. And maybe I want that, but I can't be sure. I can't be sure right now what I want, but we also have these snaps over here. What else has 6 holes? Six holes, maybe 6. 1 plant. No, I don't really want to try to figure that out right now. But yeah, there was a dream that I was listening to a talk by Matika today at the Symposium, and let me see. Where is it? Today through Evergreen. And Matika Wilbur, who's Swinomish and Tulalip. And she was talking about her dreams of indigenous sovereignty and switch thing. Hey, we're starting the video again on Twitch. Yeah, so I was just saying that I was listening to a talk by Matika Wilbur, who's Swinomish and Tulalip, and she was speaking, kind of starting off the equity symposium that Evergreen's having. And okay, so I unpicked these plackets. I'm going to set them over by the iron. And then I realized that I haven't enclosed this gathering stitch, and there's this needle just hanging here, and so we can start sewing that. And but what the dream that Matika was sharing was so beautiful. It was around indigenous sovereignty and like people of all hues learning and speaking different indigenous languages. And I love to hear that, and I would love for that to come true. And I wonder how, and at the same time, like, yeah, that was just something I've been thinking about since I just watched it. And it seems pretty relevant always. But then it makes me wonder, like, it makes me wonder about language and like the realities, the worlds, and the cosmologies that language holds, and the power that language holds, and the connection to the land. And so, or the relationship with the land, that's what Matika was talking about. And I think I'm just wanting to share that, what she was talking about, to share that with you, and to bring more awareness to that. And to also, like, think about our worlds that we create in our existence. Like, there's so our creative capacity is unlimited. Depending on, like, where we're at and how we're seeing things as they are, how we're not rejecting where we're at in our relationships, but how we're, like, tending to them, how we're acknowledging and accepting things, and, like, moving through it. And now we're back to our gathering. We're sandwiching our gathering now. Like, what holds, what binds a gathering together? Is it the people and the land? Is it I'm imagining, like, the illusion of self melting away into being and so with that, maybe it is these two sides of the binding that are enclosing the sandwich. Well, the two of the binding are what kind of make up the sandwich, and then the gathering is the inside of the sandwich. And so maybe we're just gathering for sandwiches, or maybe we're gathering for to be all that we are. Maybe we're gathering to come together to be all that we are with each other because we know that. We are. Because we are each other. And we are ourselves. And this place of gathering feels like kind of where that begins, where that becomes apparent. But at the same time, like, it's apparent here in this garment, like this garment wants it to be, yet here I am with my camera and the camera is actually, I have two cameras. I have my phone camera and my camera, and it's like two eyeballs looking in, which is you. And so then we can acknowledge our reflections of each other. Our reflections. This movement of back and forth. I see a reflection of the ocean. An aspect of ourselves, an aspect of myself that has perpetuated for a very long time. The ocean as a great ancestor. Ocean, is the ocean healed? Is the ocean a healed ancestor with all of her, with all of their, with all of the things we put into the ocean, all of the waste and the plastics, and noticing how does the ocean respond as a source, as a life source. I think it's not just the material. It's not just that there's stuff we put in the ocean, that the ocean doesn't appreciate or doesn't want, but it's also like where we're at in our minds and our hearts and how that's happening. And something Anissa was talking about in the Slow Factory fashion and spirituality video was about how, like, she was talking about beauty and she was saying, like, how she was asking the question, like, how I almost want to read what she was saying because I just want to quote her. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is what she said. Anissa Tavangar said, "So it is investigating for yourself. What does beauty look like in the context of justice, in a context of compassion, and a context of reciprocity? In what ways can beauty be evolved in our own minds? Because, of course, that's what we can control, to reflect these qualities. And the reality is that if a beauty that we see and that we experience only really applies to a very small group of people, then surely it cannot be a beauty that is just, a beauty that is reciprocal, that is compassionate, etc." And so here, thinking about like the lives of these materials and the processes that they've gone through, and like this feeling of tending, this feeling of tending to a part of the earth, a part of my reality that I've experienced in an awareness around fast fashion and exploitation of resources and labor. And so once something's already happened, these things have already been, it's already been done. It's almost like these clothes, like many of my perhaps unhealed ancestors, and in a sense they are my unhealed ancestors, where not only have they been neglected, but they have neglected in their own making, and they've neglected compassion and reciprocity in many ways, and justice as well. And so And so that's why I feel like there's a lot of different aspects. All the parts gathered here. Shaken from an internalized perception, recognizing the blocks, recognizing the wall that was built before you were born, maybe even before your parents or their parents were born. Recognizing the draping video to what was happening with all the twisted shoulder and the feathers of a wing. And it makes me think of like the breath of a wing and like the alchemy of a wing. And it feels like a filter, like a powerful filter. But I think it's more than that as well. Stitching around these flowers. Any comments? We have one viewer on here. Let us know if you have any comments or questions or where you're tuning in from. Maybe is that viewer just me? Or is it somebody actually tuning in? Yeah. So here we are. Making amends. Is mending a form of like making amends somehow? Here we are, approaching the final gather, the edge of the gathering, the edge of the gathering, closing those borderlands of a space. And this is where we're at. We still have this far to go and this much thread. I think we're going to need a new thread. Do, do, do. Ah. No. No comments? Okay. One day there'll be a comment. Maybe we'll try this on another platform. Oh, I didn't need that long of a piece. Making amends with, I was going to say the past, but if it's still with you, then it's definitely making amends with the present moment. And what you're doing now, where you are now. And yeah, celebrating. Should I celebrate every single stitch that I make? Or should I celebrate like an accumulation of stitches and cuts? I could celebrate my posture. I could celebrate each stitch by practicing my posture. And I guess the song feels like, and like the humming feels like a gentle celebration. But not always. Yeah. I'd like to work with people, I think, after, like in workshops and group workshops and one-on-one, and in these kinds of poetic, reflective spaces and sewing rituals. And so I'm working on putting together some workshops to share with you all. And so that's something that I'm dreaming about as I'm sewing this. Something that I'm dreaming about to offer once I've created this collection. I think that something that tries to kind of like seep in the feeling of like tiredness when, and I think that's related to the feeling of like manual labor and stuff, but it's also a feeling of like carrying some sort of weight. And for me right now, I think that weight is some sort of expectation of, it's like a pressure of some sort of expectation of what I'm going to make, how much I'm going to make, like how many pieces am I going to make. In the next 2 months. And that reminds me of like the mindset of fast fashion, even though it's still pretty far removed and I'm moving at a relatively slow pace. I think that the pressure of those expectations come from that mind space. And so if I want to move in a space that is light and like at ease, that's what I want. That's what I want this to feel like. I want this to feel at ease. Which makes me think of ease as a sewing term. And yeah, like, how can this be playful as well? Like, and also recognizing that there's layers of play. So how how can this be infused with play? Have I forgotten how to play? Am I just playing in my mind, in my mind's eye? Has it all become so serious? Thinking about domestication and aprons. But I definitely feel more like I'm rocking a baby to sleep than a child who's playing. But that's in this moment, in this reflection. I think there's also a lot present that like is just being open to flowing through. Streams. And if you're tuning in, I'd love to hear if you're creating something. I've come to the end of this, well, if you're creating something, every moment could be an act of existence. And in that aspects, there could be probably creative aspects at play. So I've come to the end of this part and am I'm thinking about the other piece, the other skirt piece that was in the gestating narratives video, and I'm wondering if that wants to come weave into our world. So here's our gathering, and now we're going to stretch. Maybe even stand up. Okay. And here, the front of the shirt, where, oh, we got a pleat, we got a little pleat in there. Thinking about where does this lie? Where do the wings, where do the wings lie? Where do they fly? Where do they lie and fly? Where do they rest? Where are they resting? Aha! I found a place. I found a place that envelops the tucks in between, and this is where we will baste the materials together. And I envision something more than that as well. Just getting my pins out as I pin this. So I envision these ruffles. I envision more scallops. Those are actually scallops. I envision more scallops. And I envision basting this on, but before I do that, let's come over to the ironing. Well, okay, no, I'm gonna let the ironing board heat up. Well, not the board, but the iron, which is on the board. Which part is on the board? Which of you is on the board? Which is on the board? Whose processes alive, revived, remembering something so familiar yet not the copyright. What modes, whatever mode brings a place that's through. And maybe what it is, maybe what it becomes is a place of recognizing the scallops in here. We're not there yet. We're still coming into these formations that will come together. And how did this happen? Oh, this was like folded or something. And I keep wanting to be elaborate as I elaborate. And I'm realizing that that's not necessary. It's just not necessary, but okay. Oh, that's not right. That's not laying well. There's one pin I will secure for now. If things are not laying well, then we can readjust. If you cannot fall asleep and melt into the oneness of all that you are, perhaps there's a point around the border. Perhaps there's a winged shoulder to pull through. Perhaps there are layers. Once it is laying well, perhaps there still are layers to unveil. And now we have both sides on there, and our iron is heated up. So maybe we can move over here now. Maybe we can move over here now. Get these cords. Okay. I think once we're still getting used to this space, and whatever space you're getting used to, maybe you don't even want to be used to it ever. But it's like this space that we're moving through is where we're at. And that's okay sometimes cords get tangled. Sometimes the different lines reveal something to the other line. Sometimes they remain contained. And here we are. Oh, you can't even see me. So over here. Here we are ironing with the steam on. First to lay it flat on one side. And the smell of ironing from grandmother's closet. Not my grandmother, somebody's grandmother. That distinct smell of bitterness. I know that maybe not bitterness, but maybe like a staleness. I'm going to drink some water. But I also want to say that vinegar, once this is all sewn together, once it's finished in a state of completion, I can soak it all in vinegar, and that should help the smell. That will help the smell. I think there's a definite, what is the relationship between vinegar and plastic? Or like synthetic? Oh. I think I wrote about that before. I think it might be on my blog for the Synthesize Being collection. I'm thinking about all the machine embroidery that's on the white shirt, and I'm thinking about the hand embroidery on those flowers, and I'm thinking about the black and white and flowery material. I'm thinking about how that just wants, it wants a texture. So is that some form of embroidery, or like embroidery / weaving? Or yeah. Maybe that's what it is. Embroidery, weaving. Look at that. Look at those shapes. Cut and unfolded and revealed. Oh yes, I like those shapes. How they reveal what came before and how it was released. Okay. What is the best way to see? Here. Yeah, okay. Okay. Right. We're going to baste these parts on, but we're thinking about we're thinking about adding a scallop as it's appliqued. We're thinking of adding a border that's a scallop, and I'm thinking about the hem of the sleeve becoming that border, because we can cut that off. We can cut that off and place it. But I mean, I definitely want to like unstitch this hem anyways. But I'm also just thinking of like perhaps it won't be the sleeve hem that becomes the scalloped frill. Frill. Fur. For real. Fur. Ill. The frill. Maybe it will be because before I was talking when I was wearing the garment earlier in this video, and I was talking about this becoming an applique, and then once this is appliqued, then I can cut out the blue layer that is behind it to become a part of another part of it. But now I'm thinking, what happens if I cut that? And I do it in a way that it like opens up and comes out the sides, because I mean, this blue fabric is also checkered. And how are these synthetic colors distortions of worlds that once were? And how are they emergent? How are they at ease? A lot of it is, for me, I feel like in the void and the mystery. But a lot of it is also what I'm aware of. And so I'm going to think of what that opening it's right in the chest, like this blue opening. Makes me think of like water or spiraling water. And That reminds me of a dream I had. Last year, where the ocean tide was spiraling inward in one area where there was a bridge there. And here that an image of this blue material opening up like a spiral at the chest, at the heart space. And then the image came to me of like how to make a certain kind of frill, like when you cut a circle, kind of like making a peplum or something, where when you cut a piece of material around, it has like a width, but then that shape is like carried through in some sort of spiraling motion, so that when you cut it out and it opens up, like the inner circle or the inner shape is smaller and the outer shape is longer because it goes around more space. And so as it falls, it's a ripple. It's like it creates a ripple in the drape. And so thinking of a spiral opening and that creating a ripple feels potent. I want to say it feels romantic, but it also feels potent. I'm also thinking of my grandma, because in that dream, I was meeting my grandma to go on a journey with her. My grandma who's still alive. And I wonder about that journey. I wonder about that spiral. One time my grandma called me, and this same grandma, and she asked if I had tripped because she dreamt that I had tripped. And she wanted to call and make sure I was okay. And I had not tripped, but I felt maybe I was tripping. Maybe I was going through a trip. Like maybe that trip of that stage of my life, it felt like a big, just crumbling. And I wonder if that relates to the journey, going on a journey somehow, a journey, going going through these stages and experiences of life, and at that time, it was actually when my other grandma had passed away, and that combined with what felt like my whole world collapsing was like the biggest heartbreak I'd ever experienced. And my journey grandmother, I remember I wasn't talking to very many people, and I was learning. I started learning to meditate because I was really depressed, and I was having lots of heart palpitations and just like pain in my heart, like feeling the physical feelings of a heartbreak. And then my grandma, I talked to her, and she didn't even have to say many words to really like speak life into me again. And it was really simple. It was just like this, whatever you're going through is like, is building your character. And I don't know if that has any kinds of like negative triggers for anybody else. But for me, I think that's when I started to feel like it was like it was like a small like flash into like after the feeling of release or collapse or loss or heartbreak or whatever it was, whatever it is, like that feeling of like emergence, of like what comes, what that clears space for. And it made me think of like it could really be anything, like emerging from the void or emerging from nothingness could really be anything. And then that makes me think of like this dress or this garment, and in the title Gestating Narratives, it's like these stories could be anything. And like the way that the life of the story, the way that we sculpt meaning from them, because after that I became pretty obsessed with like just thinking about the character of materials as well, and feeling like falling in love with that. and the story that's just inherent in things. And when thinking of stories as like living things, and they don't need to be they don't they're not stagnant, especially because the way that we interpret them is not stagnant as long as life continues to regenerate. And so we sow and regenerate, and I'm picking out all these threads of the old story, and they're going to go into my thread bag that is for stuffing. A cushion of some sort. A cushion to break your fall from one story to the next story. Yeah. So sharing some parts of my story. And reemergence, and this flow between emptiness and emergence. And yeah, another part of that where I'm at is that, like, since the stories are like multidimensional, they're not linear. They could start at any place, at any time. They can recognize their relationship with other stories. They can, yeah. And so here's this hem that I released, and I'm thinking, like, how am I going to flip this inner layer inside of here, like this part? How am I going to flip this, and how am I going to cut into it as a spiral and flip it outward? Fruit is sun glow, pull through dreaded shoulder. Am I dreading this process? Perhaps. Another thing I notice is that if maybe I can use like a double, maybe this is what I'll do. I'll baste along the edge, and then I'll cut it apart. Like, I'll make like tailor tacks, basting along the edge, all around the perimeter along the seam line. And oh, Sounded like somebody might have been puking in the bathroom. I hope they're okay. There's a kind of release, I suppose. So I'm going to drink some water. So we're going to baste around the edge. Okay. And then we're going to cut them apart again, but the basting is, we're going to leave like the threads in there. We're going to baste along the seam line. And then these will act as like, kind of like where we then match them up again. Oops. So I want to leave some space here. Here, let's come over here. No, I wonder if I could zoom in, but maybe not. Okay, so here. I wonder if you can see, like, this tailoring tack. Okay. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave a loop where the stitch is, and then go on to the next stitch so that you'll see what happens when we get there. But so this long stitch, like 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, but once I cut these apart, there will be traces of these threads still intact, and that will be how I know where to match things up, because I know that once I take these pins out, it's remember how we laid it? We laid it in place. We laid it and we pinned it in place, and we want it in this place where we laid it. And so we're going along the potential stitch line as something to just go off of, and this will give us some seam allowance to be aware of when we're cutting into the layer below. So we're pretty much doing like stitch and then loop. Long stitch, long taut stitch, small loop, long taut stitch, small stitch, loop, long taut stitch, small loop, long taut stitch, small loop. Oops. I pulled that tight. I pulled that tight and now I'm gonna loosen it before I try to do the long taut stitch. We gotta get this loop in the small one. Okay. Now, small loop, long taut stitch. Oh. Small loop. And just to give you an idea of what's happening, I can pull them apart like this without small loop. The loop then transfers into the central in between the two areas, and then that's where I can start to clip them in between. So there's like, they're about 3/8 of an inch to a 1/2 inch, but I can clip like this. So now you can see on both sides. So we're gonna go along and do this by the relation between hands and the material, and perhaps I don't need to use that. This. How do they feel in the evening? Small loop, long and taut. Relatively, for ease of mind, for ease of movement, setting the stage. Hey, that's not what I meant to do. I forgot to do a small taut, and I just did I forgot to do a small one, and then a small loop, and then it became a long and taut. That's okay. We're just talking about the ease of making, and seems like there's a balance between that you might find yourself cultivating, that's between like planning and or like setting the stage, because because if I just set the stage, then I can play with it. But if I plan to something, then I act it out once as I plan for it, and then I act it out again. And the second time I act it out, where's the life of it? It can't be the same, because nothing is ever the same. Things are constantly changing. So then what is it? Is it where is it flow? Is it flowing? Where is the flow? Is it am I embodying the flow, or does the flow take over my existence? Does the flow take over my existence, or do I enter into the flow? Do I allow the flow of flying through space to move through me, or does it move me out of its way? That's the question. And in this moment, cultivation of balance feels like because like the art of tailoring, I think, became really planning oriented and structure oriented, and there were specific techniques, and like even this tailoring tack is kind of a play on some kind of tailoring technique. So how do we employ our techniques and in a way where we're not rigid. We're not gonna have to throw it away if something happens, but or we just don't make mistakes by virtue of not believing that mistakes are mistakes, or just the focus of doing something. Clipping this now. We've gone around with our loops. That almost reminds me of velvet or towel, like a terry cloth, how they're made. We did one side, and now we'll move to the next. Excuse me. think that I'm thinking about like how me making these garments carries like stories that I've experienced in the stitches that I've spoken to in these, and that I will continue to speak to in these episodes. And thinking of like how am I gonna bring people into this space who are like going to respect this space of ritual. And so that's one aspect. But what I started articulating was like how these garments are a collection that I'm creating for people to buy, to wear, to embody, and then to have access to the stories that are contained within them. And part of me feels like, well, if these are my stories of transformation, should I keep them? Like, are these clothes mine? And the first thing that came to mind was like, well, isn't every it makes me think of like the tenderness and the vitality that's in everything that's made. And so yes, I'm speaking these things out loud and people will have access to them, and they will relate to them however they do. And when I think of working in a capacity that's impersonal, like, where's the growth? To me, that just feels so stagnant. And so far removed, like in the realm of like consuming to consume instead of consuming to add value to our own lives too. So what I want is to create relationships with these garments and for other people to relate with them as well. And I think it's a really beautiful thing to have access to how something was made, to a lens, just a lens into what was going on at the time of the creation. And so, yeah. How's the old basting line from the past gathering that I just took out? Okay. Starting at the other side. Wonder if you can even really see what I'm doing very well, but it seems a little better. Taut. This double thread. One's taut and one's not. And I'm basting around the perimeter. I know that this shape is jagged. And it's going to be smoothed out. The process smooths these things out. I'm getting excited to wrap this up. We're almost getting to the other side. And then tomorrow we can release it and cut the spiral. Oh my gosh. Another aspect to this grandmother's story is that she called me recently telling me that she dreamt that her and I started a bra making company. And they were like the bras of her dreams, the most comfortable bras. And I told her that I don't wear bras. And is that because I don't have the most comfortable bra ever, or because it's a statement that I'm making, or maybe it's just one less layer to be concerned about and how I dress myself. But this place is right. It's right on the chest. It makes me think of this release because right now, like the white on top with all this gathering makes me feel like there's a bra above, like you're wearing your bra over your clothes or something. And it feels like that undergarment, that kind of like tunic underlayer, only it's like applique on top. In some areas in the collar, it's like gathered along the bottom edge. It's sandwiched into oblivion as it emerges. And soon it will be released. The underlayer will be released, so the shape that it's in will take form. And that I see that this is a sculpture, like a wearable sculpture. And in that, I loop and stitch. I loop and stitch. Loop and stitch. Loop around, take a bite, loop around, move through another day, another moment, another rising, another falling, another setting and evening. this last breath. Release it for now. And so thank you. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you, fire, air, earth, and water, for guiding us through. Thank you, healed ancestors. Thank you, all of our ancestors. Thank you, healed ancestors, for teaching us how to become healed and how to be and how to move through. And so I release you, and I thank you. Love.